Is it going to happen? Here it is. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Here we are. We are Legion, as I believe some of the things go. Compact and Bijou at the moment. I hope Ian will join us because we have the man, Kerry, who made the fantastic Leave Us Alone Coventry video that won the day. Sent to Coventry and made things work. So, Kerry, perhaps you'd like to introduce your business and tell us why we needed to know about what happened in Coventry.
Thank you very much indeed. So my name's Kerry Blakeman. Until July of last year, I was a serving police officer with West Midlands Police. And the last 5 years of my service, I was responsible for policing and security at Birmingham Airport, which has approximately 12 million passengers per year. So when I left the police, I purchased myself a little drone, Exhibit A here, a bit of a Mavic Air. I've got my guards on because I did a job yesterday doing a property survey, and it needed the guards on. So initially, I bought myself a Mavic Air as a little, to take photographs, and then I qualified for my permission to fly for commercial operations, and that's when I set up my business, droneheights.co.uk. So just taking photographs for clients, all kinds of things, surveying, images from the sky, group photographs, you name it. So here I am, happily enjoying myself, and of course we have the G word, Gatwick. Then we have the H word, Heathrow, which turned out to be a model aircraft. And then I suppose it's just a bit of bad timing on Coventry's part, was that they thought they could introduce a ban on the flight of drones taking off from their land. So unbeknown to me, the network of drone enthusiasts in Europe were mobilised, and they emailed the council lead that was chairing the meeting, which I attended. So I basically said, listen, guys, people need to be able to fly their drones for recreational purposes. Coventry is known as the city of innovation, the motor car, the pedal cycle, yet you're potentially stopping young people, from learning to fly their drones. So I went to the meeting, and I was fortunate in that the decision to ban the drones was deferred. So it's just to clarify that has been deferred, and I've offered to work with the City Council to develop a new policy, which I would like to see zones or areas within the local authority where people can fly their drones to learn to fly in accordance with legislation under the Air Navigation Act and the Drone Code, and actually, if asked by a council employee, to produce their liability insurance, and that's what all responsible drone owners should have. So that is it in a nutshell. I've literally a couple of days ago had a response to my Freedom of Information request. So if anybody's watching doesn't know what the FOI Act is, that basically is that most members of the public, or all members of the public, can write to local authorities and request information. So I wrote to Coventry and said, how many incidents have there been on your land where drones have been reported as a nuisance? And I can elaborate on that if you wish. But that in summary is a little bit about me and my campaign, supported by DJI also, who have been in touch to give me support. So yeah, there we are.
No, well, fair play and well done you. I really enjoyed your little live stream that you put out. That was great, and it was to the point, and said well, a spade's a spade. I'm a little bit intrigued. I just want to wind that back a little bit. So you said you were in charge of airport security at Birmingham, and then now you've got into drones. So are you a latent aviation enthusiast that made your aviation stuff take you there while you're in the police and went that way, or did you get into the drone thing having worked at Birmingham, if that makes any sense? Yeah,
no, I didn't get into the drone thing because of policing the airport. Drones were always on our what we call risk register. So you would have a number of threats at any airport in any place in the world, and they were on the risk register. But I think what became plainly clear is that when drones did appear in and around Gatwick, if they did, just saying, don't ask me to make a comment on that, but there is a theory about whether there was or wasn't drones. But it was clear that there was nothing that could actually prevent drones from going over the airspace and the airfield. So no, I was probably liked my planes, and then it was that kind of enjoy my photography. Let's buy myself a little Mavic Air as a treat, and actually think, you know what, I'll turn this into a commercial operation. And
well, again, you don't have to answer this if it yeah, don't answer this if it's too much. But okay. So when you're at Birmingham, they'd come onto your radar, pun intended. Drones had come onto your radar, and you're considering them. And I guess there must have been. I think all of us have been surprised that there doesn't really seem to have been a plan at Gatwick, if there was something or if there wasn't something. Either way, there wasn't a plan, and yeah, I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. Surely airports must have a plan.
Yeah, I think the thing is that certainly from a Birmingham perspective, when we had a problem with a drone, it was more somebody that wasn't malicious in their actions. They were just a little bit reckless. So there would be a plane enthusiast wanting to get different images. So it was never that kind of malicious act. What compare and contrast that to Gatwick, where you've probably got the first malicious act trying, which obviously shut the airport down for, I think it was about 36 hours. So it was almost that like, oh, what have we got? Oh, we've got nothing. There's nothing to be able to intervene and prevent that from happening.
And then let's wind forward to Coventry. So you're creating skate parks for drones then? You're the skateboarding youth that's now got his place to go.
The 51-year-old bloke that goes to the council and says, "Please, can we have a space to fly our drones?" This, for me, this isn't really about me. This is about for the future generation, and actually, and the positives that drones can bring. I've actually got the freedom of information request that Coventry City Council have sent to me. So I asked the question in 2016, 17 and 18, how many reports have there been to the council about nuisance drones? 12 in 2016. In 2017, they couldn't give me a number, but they said a council employee at a local park raised complaints. So it wasn't a member of the public, it was a council employee. 2018, the same issue was again raised at a location, not by a member of the public, by a council employee. So yeah, so there is not a lot of data or evidence which points to a problem with drones. Now, as part of my research, if you're going to legislate, i.e. local bylaws, local councils can put local bylaws in, then they can only do that if there isn't a particular piece of legislation that can tackle it. Well, there is. There's the Air Navigation Order, there's the UK Drone Code. You don't fly within 50 meters of somebody. You don't endanger people, property or animals, okay? And the next part is, if you're going to introduce a bylaw, you have to consult extensively. Where's the consultation? So it was almost, for me, it was a case of, this is just wrong on so many levels. Coventry, City of Culture 2021, known as an innovative city. Yeah, actually, if you're going to ban the flight from your land, where do members of the public go to fly?
Yeah.
And for me, the impact there is that you'll probably get more illegal flights from gardens, from roads, which then impacts on West Midlands Police. And we've had austerity in this country. The police struggle, as I know full well, to respond to incidents of burglary, robbery, and things happening in the street right here, right now. So how are they going to respond effectively to a report of a drone in somebody's garden? So yeah, so we're on a bit of a journey, and I'm hoping that I can work with Coventry City Council for defined skate park areas, as you call it. So yes.
Well, one of the rules we have here, you've obviously not been here before, Kerry, but one of the rules is we can't talk common sense, and unfortunately we may have to ban you because you were just talking common sense. It's just that we don't allow common sense here.
Yeah.
You're bob on right. The legislation and regulations, however, I'm not quite sure what the exact parlance is, are already there around the world. Around the world, there is stuff in place, and enforcement is hard. And that's kind of, I think, the tricky thing between the regulator, who has maybe has 4 or 5 people, if that could go off and investigate and enforce these things, and the local police force, which, as you say, has got a lot better other things to do than see what Mrs. Miggins is talking about. So I think enforcement is anybody with any sense, even Bruce advocates enforcement, and that's unusual. It's just obvious, isn't it? I don't know. Does anyone else want to stop me ranting? Someone stop me ranting.
No, you were ranting. You were ranting quite well, Gary. I believe that we can end up with all these drones nonsense because all of this, and Bruce is going to support me on that. All of this started when cameras started to appear on RC vehicles. So instead of banning drones, we just ban cameras on flying vehicles, and the problem solved. Right, Bruce?
Yeah, that's right. And it'll open up the hobby to blind people if we do that, Louis. That'll be fantastic. Think of the opportunities. No. I'll just mount a big white cane on the front of my plane.
No. The thing is, without cameras on flying vehicles, you cannot fly beyond line of sight, and there is no problem of peeping toms. So problem solved.
Well, peeping toms isn't the problem, and you can fly beyond visual line of sight. You just set your waypoints and away it goes, and then you wait for it to come back. So it doesn't solve all the problems, Louis, and I don't think privacy is the big issue. It is this whole threat, because I don't know if you realize this, Louis, but it's only a matter of time before one of these drones brings down an airliner. Have you thought of that, Louis?
Oh my God! How can such a small foam vehicle bring down aluminium and steel vehicle?
Oh, no, but what you fail to realize is if the pilot has his window open, it could fly in and he could choke on it. There's always a reason. This probability is low, I must admit, but there is always a possibility, and it is only a matter of time.
And our friend Nicola is laughing his backside out because he's already planning what he's going to fly with these foamies.
Right. In the comments, Jeff Hurst, Ian's there. He's being a slacker. Apparently, it's cold in his shed. Apparently, it's cold up in the northern hemisphere. It's perfectly fine down here.
Cold?
It's apparently in his shed it's very cold. But he says to Kerry, give him a pat on the back from him. So consider that done. And Jeff Hurst says that West Lothian Council have already banned drones from flying on their land, including parks. And he has an email chain. So are you going to roll out a nationwide sort of thing, Kerry?
There's an interesting point there, in that some local authorities are referring to a local bylaw. So local authorities in England and Wales can make those local bylaws themselves. Now, some local authorities are coming up with a policy to say we don't allow drones. Okay, so that's a policy. You could have a policy to say we aim to recycle 50% of the waste that we collect. So my point is, it's almost that. So you have a policy. So what? So if I go along to Council X's land, where your policy is you're not allowed to use our land, but you're not referring to a bylaw, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's almost that. So what? Now, I'm not advocating drone owners in the UK going to somebody's private estate, getting into the private estate and taking off, from their land. But this is public land that we're talking about that is owned by the public. So it's almost that kind of, who are you to say that? Who are you, so what, you have a policy. I accept that some local authorities are pointing to bylaws. What I would say with Coventry is they're pointing to a bylaw from 1875.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Wow.
And it makes reference to the pleasure ground. So a park is a pleasure ground, and you shall not bring a machine onto a pleasure ground. And
That's
the city council are
fantastic.
saying a machine is a drone.
That's
So the lawmakers in 1875 were fantastic. They knew these things were coming along. They knew back then, and there shall be no machines. And also in the same act, you shall not cycle your bike in a park. Don't. It's naughty. It's wrong. I rest my case. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, absolutely, and I'm one of the hope that ladies would never ride a bicycle in the park. I mean, that would just be absurd.
The interesting thing here is that the council cannot regulate the airspace. That's solely the prerogative of CAA. So all they can do is stop you from taking off and landing in the park. And we had the same situation here for a long time because, again, we didn't. But our regulator was silly enough to basically hand control of the airspace over to whoever owns the property. So any property owner can say, you're not allowed to fly above my property. And that's backed up by CAA, which is a really, really bad aspect of our regulations. But before that came in, we had a situation where we could take off on the property next to a park and fly over it all we liked, because we were taking off from land we had, and only the CAA could prohibit anyone entering particular airspace. So there are ways around it. If Coventry do decide to come in, find a neighbouring landowner who's friendly and just fly from his piece of property, take off and land from there and fly over the parks if you want to, and say, stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, I've actually got like a projector stand which has got 4 wheels on. So I thought to myself, well, actually, if I wheel my projector stand down to the park and I take off from my projector stand, I don't know. Because I'm connected to the local authority's land, am I committing an offence?
How is your retirement going? Have you got a bit of time on your hands? I have a projector stand and I know how to use it. No, So what happened? All right. So if I ask you, if you may put your policeman's hat back on, and then so you've got a bylaw and you've got their opinion. I forgot how you put it. What would the policeman do when he turned up there? Because it's not actually a law then, is it?
Yeah, right. So this is an interesting one, and it's from my old force, and it's literally just happened. And I'll say as best I can from the information that I've got. So Birmingham Airport, close proximity, probably about 1.5 kilometres. There's a report of a drone being flown. It would appear that the police helicopter is scrambled to the report of this drone. And just by chance, when they're looking for this drone, they happen to find a stolen car and they arrest a couple of people. The police on the ground locate the pilot, and apparently they're filming a grime video. Now, it is now an offence to fly within 1 kilometre of the airport boundaries. Part of the road is within the 1 kilometre boundary. Other parts of the road are beyond the 1 kilometre. But we have something here called a congested area. Yes. So you can't fly a drone in a congested area. This is a densely populated urban residential area. My old police force have said they've spoken to the pilot and there were no offences disclosed. Right, well, hang on a minute. Do you not know about the air navigation order and the breach of flights in congested area? And it just goes back to a point that I know when I was a cop, I had no training on drone legislation. I used to police a large public festival called the Godiva Festival in Coventry back in 2016, and we had a Chinese student flying his Phantom. Would it be a Phantom Pro or something? One of the big ones, as I call it. And bless him, he flew over this festival, thousands and thousands of people. So that was the first time that I dealt with it. We dusted him down back then, because if we'd have prosecuted him, he'd have lost his visa to study in this country. It was a genuine mistake. We dealt with him in a practical way. But my issue is that cops around the country don't understand the legislation. and you know, and I know that for a fact, and I've got that as I've got evidence of that. See, I'm going back to my policey days. So all I want people to fly lawfully, safely, and actually, if a drone lands in or comes into my garden and starts looking in my house, that's wrong. From a legislative point of view, but also from a privacy point of view, those matters should be investigated. The CAA have handed over the enforcement of drone legislation to the police. The police, I bet, are just too busy to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Ian's making a comment. There's a debate on interpretation of congested area, and that's why I got my crinkly map out. And my crinkly map from my aviation days tells me that anything that's yellow on this map is a congested area. Boom. That's with my pilot's hat on. That's what the CAA would have prosecuted me on. Is
Ian joining us or not?
No, Ian's afraid. He's join us, Ian. Join us from some other room so we don't see the concrete mixer. But no, what's the issue with congested areas then? What's the interpretation issue?
Well, I think you're going to test me now. Have I got my? I'll get my booklet out. So, town, city, or village is a congested area in the UK. I think what Ian may have been referring to is that if it's a summer's morning and it's 6 o'clock and I go into the centre of Coventry, technically it's a congested area, but if there's nobody about, then it might not be a congested area.
Oh, that's not fair. Well, when I've got my flying hat on and I'm flying something, there's no when I'm driving something, there's no it's 6 o'clock in the morning, no one's around, don't black through here at 50 feet. Still a congested area for me. They'll still come after me.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and this is it, and this is something that I'm working on separately. There is a lot of it's not black and white with the drone code / air navigation order in the UK. A lot of it is left open for interpretation.
So what's congested then? Is congested? Does congested mean is it like a cold? Is it people that are congested, or because the buildings don't move in the centre of town?
No. So it says town, city, or village.
Yeah.
So if you live in the country, happy days. When you take off from public land, happy days, not a problem. It's just about it's about being sensible. I posed a question the other day on one of the groups that I'm on. So little old Mavic Air here. It's a nice summer's day in the centre of Coventry. I'm in my garden. My Mavic Air takes off for about literally 12 feet vertically up to take a picture of everybody at my barbecue. And that's it. I don't cross anybody's boundary or anything like that. I've committed an offence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the New Zealand, it pains me to say it, but New Zealand has a very good regulation, and that's the I forgot what you've called it, Bruce. The thing
shielded operations. Shielded operations.
Yeah.
And you can get it. Well, Bruce, please explain what that means for Kerry.
Yeah, shielded operations basically means that the airspace is deconflicted because you can fly as high as the tallest object within 100 meters, and that means basically you're not going to run into any aircraft or whatever. It means you can fly right up to the boundary of an airfield, providing in that case there's also a barrier to stop your drone from drifting onto an airfield. But it enables people in built-up areas to fly their craft legally, so long as they basically don't fly above the tallest thing around, and that makes a lot of sense, especially for people that want to fly in their own backyard or in parks and things. We have a couple of parks close to helipads and airfields, and we can fly there as long as we don't go above the treetops. And it's common sense. You're not going to hit a 747, below the tree level in the local park.
Yeah, and you raise a point there. So I said earlier, if you fly within 1 kilometre of an airport, Coventry Airport, which is near me, I wanted to go and take some pictures of the village hall, and got in touch with air traffic control and put in some risk assessments, some mitigation measures. One of them is like 20 great big trees that are probably about 100 foot high. Yes, the air ambulance helicopter flies over. So one of my mitigation was to get permission. Well, I won't fly any higher than the treetops. and actually I'll give you a call and to make sure that the helicopter's not in flight. I'll probably be up in the sky for about 6 or 7 minutes maximum. Wouldn't give me permission, wouldn't give me consent. And that's from a qualified pilot with a risk assessment, with with control measures in place. You just think, well, what's the bloody point?
Is this recently? Post,
yeah.
Or post all the?
It was probably pre-Gatwick, actually. It literally was, next to a village hall, within 1,000 meters. I kind of emailed the guy, and he said, I know the legislation and all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, fair enough then. But actually, I'm putting in an intervention. I won't fly higher than the trees. I'll keep it within 50 meters. And actually, can I just pick the phone up to make sure the helicopter's not going to be scrambled? Because, of course, the responsibility if the helicopter is scrambled is on me. If I endanger that flight, then it's down to me. That's my responsibility, not air traffic control. But anyway, I didn't get the permission.
Yes. It's a funny world, isn't it?
Indeed.
So you need to put your drone on a big long stick. That's what I've done in the past. I've put a camera on a stick to get that aerial footage, and that's safe. But if I flew a drone at the same height, it's not. It's crazy.
Yeah,
do that.
Exactly.
I'll just coming back to the comments. Jeff Hurst says West Lothian Council have no bylaw. They make reference to flyers not having insurance as being then surely flyers would mitigate that by getting insurance. And then what would West Lothian Council do? And then Craig Michael Grice says the National Trust is public land, yet we are not allowed to fly in it. I'm not sure that the National Trust land is public land. I'm not sure about that.
Are you aware of the plans that are coming in like November 2019 for like registration of drones in the UK and the online competency test? I have said publicly, I think they might have missed a trick actually in terms of the basic liability insurance, for the requirement to produce that. So as it stands at the moment, if I'm flying lawfully in my local park and it's now November 2019, I can be asked to produce my registration document. I can be asked to produce my certificate of competence that I've passed online, but actually there's no power for me or requirement for me to have liability insurance. And I think that's just common sense, because if your drone does happen to fall out onto somebody's head and it injures them, then you are covered.
Yeah,
can you get reasonably priced insurance in the UK? Because I know in Canada they were going to have that mandatory insurance requirement, but they couldn't get insurance at a reasonable price, so it was impractical because people couldn't afford it.
Yeah, it's the same in Portugal with insurance prices. Although it's mandatory, insurance prices are through the roof.
I've paid £30 for something like, I think it's 5 million liability.
Oh, Ian's been tempted out. He's going to put a coat on and go out to his shed, as well. So much common sense is being discussed. So let's quickly wrap this up and make sure we're gone by the time he's got to his shed. Should we do that?
Doesn't he have internet in his house? Why has he only got internet in his shed?
Well, it comes in boxes delivered by Amazon, doesn't it? I'm sure it's easier to deliver it to his shed and just put him there. So we'll await the news from the shed. Hasn't he got a heater? I don't know. And I thought northern folks were supposed to be hardy. Yeah, it sounds to me, the thing we generally, or I certainly rant about, is I think and I think you've touched on it, Kerry, is that there's opportunity for the next big ideas in aviation and computing and all sorts of things are going to come from some child that's currently smashing something into a tree in a park somewhere and learning by experience. And very shortly, when mum and dad's got to turn up with that raft of paperwork just so they could go and crash something into a tree, it's going to have a big effect on STEM or STEAM, the subjects. And that's my worry about this all around the world. It's kind of ridiculous.
For instance, in Portugal, cyclists, so a bicycle can go on the streets, as the same right of passage as a regular car, but they're not. A bicycle does not have an insurance. So, and if you go and try to insure a drone for recreational purposes these days, you'll pay more than for a car with civil liability. So the problem is the this all this insurance stuff that is going around all over Europe, not only UK, there will be a time that things will have to settle. The insurance industry is waiting, and so they don't know what the liabilities can be. So they're playing it safe and asking for huge premiums, at least in most of Europe.
Yeah, I see in Western New Zealand, across the water in Australia, they were considering mandatory insurance for all bicycles, and they reckon it would be impossible because there's so many bicycles. How would they ever get compliance? So they've shelved it for a little bit. I don't know if you picked up any of that last week, Bruce. And well, whilst we're waiting for Ian, and I've mentioned Australia, let's just move into the little Australia piece, which they've got their another reckoning generated by politicians. And you did a very good video about that this week, Bruce. Well, let me just read from the top of the lines. In 2019, CASA proposes to introduce a remotely piloted aircraft registration and RPA operator accreditation requirement as a way of monitoring the safe and lawful operation of RPAs. And basically, RPA more than 250 grounds operated recreationally and all. Oh, there's certain exceptions. Sorry, that's well, actually, can you unpack it, Bruce? You'll do a better job than me because you found the inconsistencies.
Yeah, they've basically said everyone has to sit in a competence exam online, and those things we know they're a bit of a joke because it's you can get someone to do that for you, and you don't necessarily have to do anything. And then you have to register, and it's $20. And they have provided an exemption for people flying at CASA-approved model aircraft flying fields, but we don't know what they are or where they are or if there'll be any, and what the requirements are for getting approval. So it does open the door a little bit, but really it just says that, and there's also looking at age limits. So you'll have to be, they suggest 16 before you're able to fly and get registered. So it's like, what are we doing? We're disconnecting a whole new generation of people from a hobby that has done so much in terms of growing aerospace and aviation and things, and even space flight. It's all come from this hobby of kids playing with model aircraft, and now we're going to sever that bond. So what's going to happen 20 years down the track? We're going to have a lack of aviation engineers and a lack of pilots and a lack of all the people who have driven this whole industry. And by then it's too late. We've left it too late. But Australia, yeah, they're just following. CASA, as I've said on a number of occasions, they had a really good regulatory framework. They had a break point at 2 kilograms for commercial operations, so you can get your Phantom Pro and go and do a whole lot of stuff without all the paperwork and the certifications and things that were necessary for heavier craft. But now they're basically falling into line with political pressure. The politicians, they had a consultative process, which, and I mentioned this in my video, 90 to 95% of all RPAS operations around the world are recreational. People flying their drones on holiday or on the weekends or whatever, or the model aircraft, that's the vast majority of drone operations. But the panel that was consulted to come up with these regulations was drone industry, the people who make drones and use them commercially. So how can you have one tiny 5% of the entire market coming up with and consulting to produce regulations that control the other 95%? It's totally unacceptable, but that's exactly what's happened in Australia, and it's happening all around the world. It seems like, oh, you just fly drones for a hobby, you're not important, but oh, you're going to make money, we want to listen to you. Not good enough. So Australia is turning into a dog's breakfast. It's going to be as bad as all the other countries. And as I say, the big thing with drone registration is, would registration have made any difference in the case of Gatwick? It wouldn't have, or Heathrow. No, it wouldn't have. It doesn't prevent bad people from doing bad things, and it doesn't help you track them down. In the only case a drone offender was tracked down as a result of finding parts of a drone, it was the serial number on the motor. If they'd had a registration sticker on that drone, they probably would never have recovered it. It was only the serial number on the motor. So they say registration will help. Well, it hasn't stopped people from misusing firearms. It hasn't stopped people from misusing cars. It doesn't. It's a feel-good, knee-jerk political reaction and a way to generate revenues. And the big worry is that once you get a list of people on a register, then as happened with the Gatwick, if there's an incident in an area, you go around and you roll all the people who are on the register that live in that area and see where were you. So I'm totally anti-registration. Australia has lost its crown as the best regulations in the world. So that may fall to New Zealand or perhaps Bulgaria. We don't know.
Mr. Simpson, can I play my politician role? My politician hat. So
he's a skater boy.
Okay, so when you say that people are, we are stifling innovation by flying the models and all that, how can that be if 95% of the people are buying off-the-shelf drones? So where's the innovation on that?
Well, when I was a kid, I bought an off-the-shelf kit for a model and built the model. It's not even necessarily about
they're
building
buying
stuff.
ready to fly, Bruce.
Yeah.
They're buying
Yeah,
the
they are, but-
Mavics, the Phantoms.
Yep.
They're buying that. That's the problem
that's
that
right.
is happening. So
But that's putting the passion into
that's
them.
not. Come on, it's
Yeah.
putting the passion.
I mean,
it's
most
not.
young mechanics buy their first car. They don't build it, but that leads them on to car engineering, all that sort of stuff. You don't have to build everything, but a lot of people are building stuff. And you know,
Yeah, but they don't have to learn, because they don't have to learn how to fly. They don't know what is port and starboard. They don't know which light goes on which side. They don't understand the physics of the model. So that was the role of flying clubs. So model flying clubs, that you would get more experienced people would teach you how to fly. That thing has almost vanished, and as the same number of hardcore members that used to have 3, 5, 10, 15 years ago. So all the new crowds that has come up to the what you call the hobby, it's just playing the Kakutes, the DJIs, the whatever brand that comes off the shelf. So
the regulators should be encouraging. They should be encouraging young people, because people still fly model aircraft, but very few regulators draw a distinction. I mean, in Australia, it's not a case of if you fly a model aircraft, you're exempt from the registration. It's only if you fly a model aircraft at a CASA-approved flying field. What about the kids that can't travel, 10K to a registered flying field? What about the ones that just want to build a model and fly it in the park? They're being basically forbidden from the hobby.
Yes, that's the entire point. So their fathers and mothers will take them to the flying field that the news from here is about 60 Ks, so not so lucky like you, and travel 60 Ks to see a plane built with balsa fall after 30 seconds. So it's that's the whole point. So I think the regulators are not too worried with the regular modelers, so that's why they get the exemption. And most of the regulations all over the world are giving those exemptions to the flying fields.
I'm gonna pull up a sandbag. I've said this before. We're gonna greet Ian, who's cold in the shed as well. But
let him freeze.
Let him freeze. We're not dealing. I think we've got another distinction. There's two distinctions to make here. One is between model aircraft and DJI class off-the-shelf drones. That needs to happen. And also, I think we're going to make a distinction now between the regulator, aviation regulators, and ministers and politicians. I think that's very much what's coming into play now. And I'm going to use the story I've said before. 2010, I flew at Farnborough. The bloke in charge that sorted out at the Civil Aviation Authority that to allow drones to fly at Farnborough then flew in a Spitfire. He was an aviator. He saw the future. He knew what it was about. 75,000 people. We did that in 2010, and that was aviators and aviation-based people behind it. We've moved from that situation. We've moved in the last 8 years to 9 years into a situation where politicians are involved. And with that little rant, that's another rant I've had. We're going to hand it over to Ian in the cold shed, who believes common sense is being said here. So over to you, Ian. What do you have to say for yourself?
Oh yeah, well, I was glad to see so much common sense. That's why I had to come on. It was good to see Aeryon and what he's done with Coventry, because I saw that at the time, and in fact I fired off an email as well and encouraged others to do so. Even not being local from there, I just wanted to give the experience from my local council. So I specifically cited local examples, because originally we were going to follow. I mean, I think this might have started with Newcastle, but I know councils are they've actually lifted and dropping directly onto their own policies. Newcastle Council's policy, which is wholly anti-drone. It won't even allow commercial operation across roads without them being closed and so on. So it's quite a strict policy that's been done from the viewpoint of drones must be incredibly dangerous, which we know isn't the case. So it's good to see any example of sort of drone pilots standing up. Because we've seen so many councils. I mean, Leicester's done it. Leeds is gradually doing it. I think there's only one park where you can fly now. And it's going on throughout the UK. So we're basically banning drones by the back door. And drone operators aren't doing anything about it, or they're shouting about it after it's happened. And we do need to be proactive and speak to our local councillors. If you actually reach out to them and speak to them, you can find actually they're a lot more willing to listen than you think they might be. I mean, that was one of the things I'd done. I actually went out and bought a Mavic Air specifically, not because I wanted a Mavic Air, specifically wanted an example to take down to the council to show them you don't need to fear these things, because they've been presented with an image in the press of these are big, scary things that, you know, fall out of the sky and kill people, where that doesn't meet the use case for the drones that people are flying now. You know, people are flying drones typically less than, certainly under 2 kilogram, often under 1 kilogram. So, and once they saw it, they were going, really? Is that what they're like? Is that the size? And suddenly everyone was prepared to listen, because it had broken the stereotype in their head that the media planted in there. And if we all did that, I think, well, we could certainly push back and hopefully get some common sense. It is difficult at the other end, as you've just mentioned, because we've got the political pressure at the top of government, where because of the Gatwick, you know, it feels like the pressure in the police to come to a conclusion, irrespective of what facts they might have to go on. In that, you know, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of evidence, as we discussed before. But then, obviously, then using that to justify legislation, you know, the Conservative Party going, oh, we're being tough on crime because we're bringing this legislation forward quicker to counter the Labour Party, who are getting pressured from Balpa because they're a union, and they're feeling that, you know, oh, well, we've got to say that drones are dangerous. And I just wish these things weren't getting the political, being used as political football, because we've seen that in the past with technology. As we said, cited the example of the motor car in the past, where I think it set the UK back on the world stage about 40 years for the legislation we brought in. And a lot of that was because the railways were pressuring, you know, the policymakers of the time to legislate against cars, because they knew it was going to affect their industry. And this actually is an interesting point, and one that I made on to Coventry Council, funnily enough. I did this on Twitter. The guy that fought the legislation, the Red Flag Act, to effectively unchain the motor industry in this country, was a businessman in Coventry at the time. So you actually have, historically, Coventry making the right decision. And as a result of that, they ended up with a car plant. It was the Daimler car plant in their city, because they were forward thinking. And this is what councils need to be. As anything, technology shouldn't be feared. It's a tool. The majority of us will use it responsibly. So there you go. That's my rant.
Get in. Whereabouts is your local authority, or don't you want to say?
Oh no, I'm up in Bradford, and it was from those talks we ended up going for the high flying challenge with Nesta, and we were picked as one of the cities. But that would have never have started if there hadn't have been that discussion between drone flyers and between the council. And once the council realised how many drone flyers they had in the city and the positive contribution they were having, they thought, actually, this is something we should be embracing, not pushing back against. And I don't know if it'll ever come to anything, but, you know, I have had discussions online. Can't we do something proactive? We don't see any council being pro-drone and setting up places where you're allowed to fly drones, and actually set an example of saying you can integrate them and it can be done safely. A point that was made earlier, and I know you made it, and it was quite correct, and I'm of the same view, is rather than cracking down with legislation, we should make the liability insurance compulsory, because that takes away a lot of the concern. Then at least if something does happen, and we know it's very rare, you only need to look at the police reports. It's very rare that, you know, a drone hits a car and does some damage, but you know, there are a few cases of it happening. At least if then people are compensated and you know, the insurance is there, it takes away a lot of the argument.
Yeah, you make some really good points. We're obviously on the same page, and I think the thing for me is that the bylaws and the policy is one thing, but it's only when you dig and you actually find that there are set procedures that the council should go through before they introduce bylaws, and they haven't introduced and they haven't consulted with the community, and then you actually look at the amount of complaints or not complaints that have been made, and it's almost that kind of, well, what are we doing here? And just on that, I've lots of people have reached out to me. I've just mentioned it before, DJI. I could not believe that the world's largest manufacturer of recreational drones, DJI, have reached out to say, Kerry, can we support you? It's almost like that. Hang on a minute, I think I might be onto something here. I might be I might have a point. And also, I've lots of people have reached out to me in Coventry. The universities are doing a lot of good work around drone racing. But again, these are young people who are the future. They're people who are studying aeronautical aviation. You know, they're all really clever kids who are flying drones. They're building drones. And it's just really good to see. I was invited to a learning lab the other day. Flying drones indoors, VR, all in my home city, that are wanting to ban drones. It's like, hello, what's going on?
Yeah, there's a lot of public pressure coming on from the media has vilified us top and bottom. One thing, you're talking about the procedures and that for bylaws. In New Zealand, our law is based quite a bit on UK law. And in New Zealand, you cannot create a new bylaw unless it is to address public risk or nuisance. You can't just go making bylaws willy-nilly because you feel like it. There must be a rationale. And if it doesn't address public risk or nuisance, it's an invalid bylaw. So that's one of the things I use with our council to diffuse their desire to ban these damn things. And I know it's been used very successfully in Australia as well. So you might want to check the UK law, see whether that's a proviso for new bylaws.
Thank you, Bruce. I really appreciate that. I'm just Ian, with Bradford, have they got specific bylaws in relation to the prohibition of aircraft flying?
They actually have the RC bylaw, so they can already, as most councils have done, misuse that to ban drones.
Yeah.
The choosing not to, you know, given that they've seen that drones can be used positively. That said, there are some NIMBYs that are kind of are involved in. I've heard it with certain. There's a specific field where I think the council allow a group of local residents to kind of oversee it, and they're trying to use that bylaw to stop people flying their models. So it's not the council directly, but there's someone trying to misuse that law that exists, and I think that's how Leeds is potentially doing it off the top of my head. But I certainly know other councils, that's the law that they're trying to hang. You can't fly a drone off, which is a shame, because it was never intended for that reason. It was those that did have the RC laws in were mainly because these were big, loud, noisy models flying about a high speed, and they were concerned about those. Where with a drone, it poses less of the issues that were probably the reason for that bylaw to begin with.
The thing is as well, with a freedom of information request, you can find out how many officers of your local council have the power to actually prosecute you if you're on their land. So you can find out how many staff there are, and you can also find out how many prosecutions. I can tell you now, well, you'll know, Ian, with austerity, those officers will also be doing powers for fly tipping, littering in the streets. Drones won't be on the radar at all. And if you do an FOI request, well, my council have done no prosecutions under the Local Bylaws Act because, well, they haven't got the resources.
Yeah, I mean, I expect that'll be the case throughout the UK. My concern, though, is once you put the laws there, those of us that want to work within the law, as a lot of us do, you immediately say, well, I can't fly there because the council say I can't, when really you're thinking, well, why shouldn't I? But you don't want to be in that point where you're thinking, well, I'm going to ignore the law. You're thinking I'd rather fight it and get some common sense. And my worry longer term was when we got the fin system. So when we were putting our flight system in, and that's going up to a database. What we've seen with a lot of databases where they're originally intended just for police use, they then gradually get given out to other departments. They end up eventually with councils. So that what you could have in the end is a council could just run a report that came out in Excel that just said, give us every drone flight that's above one of our properties where we've got a bylaw, and then you know what will be happening then. It'll be a fine turning up in the post or some other action, because they then can do it without any manpower. So that's where I don't want us to end up. I want us to be able having the sensible debates now, so we don't end up in that.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating breach of bylaws. What I'm actually saying is that I strongly suspect that these bylaws have been implemented in the wrong way.
Yes.
There's been no public consultation. It's predominantly been based on previously remote control aircraft. Oh, and it classed as an aircraft, so we can now just lump drones into it because we don't like them and they're a bit of a pain.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that you weren't advocating that. My worry is once people feel that I'm having to break a rule, then they're thinking, well, I'm breaking a rule already. I might as well break another one and another one and another one. Once you put people in where they've got to make a choice, that they're following the rules or they're breaking them, you're inviting them then going further. And I wish we could just allow people to fly legally without having to go down that route.
Yeah, and just one final point, rather than this become the Kerry and Ian show, is you're absolutely right there. It's like, well, can I fly my drone? No, I can't. Do I want to break the rules? No, I don't. So I won't buy a drone, or I'll sell a drone. And then a dad will say to a youngster, no, I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry, daughter. You can't, because these are the way. And it just perpetuates, doesn't it? So
yeah.
So
no, I couldn't agree more. And far be it from me to say, but some people have postured that the recent corporation, a drone manufacturer that lost a lot of money in a fraud, it wasn't a fraud, it was actually covering up a loss of earnings. And that's why certain manufacturers would be very, very keen to jump on board any actions to keep to keep flying areas going. Because at the end of the day, I've always been surprised actually that all the Class A airspace around Heathrow, all the way around London, wasn't just verboten, dumb, you know, again from my my old flying days. And if you were to do that, the millions of people that potentially live in, or that do live in that area, and probably many thousands of people that have purchased equipment from manufacturers, well, they wouldn't have done, would they? So
no.
So it would, you know, been beholden on manufacturers to make sure that areas are wide open for them, and now it's shutting down. Go on, Ian.
I have to say, in DJI's defence, they were reacting to a lot of drone owners getting directly in touch and pressuring them and saying it's about time you did something. So whilst there is, you're quite correct, the financial line, and there's the incentive for them to do it, I genuinely don't think they would have been involved in Coventry and some of the previous campaigns had it not been for them getting, you know, directly. I mean, even the article you put in from Ian Povey, where it was quite critical of DJI following Gatwick. All that they did spot, and I think it did hit a nerve, especially then when you got commercial operators as well saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we're not happy, not doing anything." So I do think they were reacting, and I'm glad they did. And it's just a shame there isn't a bigger market of different manufacturers, because it obviously would help if we had, you know, like your GoPros of the world also on board as well. But given everyone else is sort of going out of the drone game, it's just DJI really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're the only one with a big enough voice, aren't they? Really. And just to join the comments, Wakefield's being mentioned, and if you're into aero modeling, Wakefield's a very famous name. I'll let you Google that. And FX Node is a new 5K limit for all airfields in the UK. I think it's by runway size, isn't it? Does somebody know any different?
I got the link earlier. Didn't have time to have a look at it, so apologies.
It's something like that. And they're saying if you breed birds, is there an altitude limits and license needed to let them fly outdoors? Well, no, because they are not controlled from the ground by yourself in 3 axis and sustaining flight. They are.
Doesn't make them any less of a risk, though, does it? And you've got to manage risk. Not that's the whole thing. If you know, pigeons. I mean, I've seen videos of pigeons and airliners having bad relations. Drones don't flock, pigeons do, but people are allowed to breed pigeons close to airports, and they have caused damage to airliners. Drones never have, pigeons have. So why do we have this distinction?
Yes, well, then you can't make a pie out of a drone, of course. East Riding in York.
There's a human behind the drone, so they always assume that the human will do the wrong thing, Bruce.
Well, yeah, you can't assume people are all malevolent. Otherwise, you live in a horrible world that is just not worth living in. And if you look at the statistics, the percentage of drone operators who cause problems are far less than the percentage of manned aviators who cause problems within the manned aviation industry. So why are we tarring everyone with a very tiny feather that represents a tiny, tiny fraction of the bad actors in the whole?
They have more experience of doing bad things. Let the drone users start practicing, and they'll start doing bad things too.
Did you invite Louis on?
Bruce was going to have a very special guest on tonight, but this very special guest didn't arrive, and to that end, I started looking at the airliner. That when they say airliner, they mean aircraft capable of carrying more than 14 people's stats for accidents and incidents since 2000. I made 2000 my start time, as that is when Australia got its regulations. You could say 1919 when drones started, whatever you like, but that was my arbitrary time. And the number of people that have passed away in airliner accidents is quite extraordinary in those 19 years. And
exactly what I've said, experience.
I know, that's why I mentioned it. That's what I said. They're really good at it. It's just a nonsense, and well, maybe is it going to die? But also this week, and I was going to mention this. I've been thinking, well, what happens? How would I feel about this whole hobby and everything that I've been around since I was a small child? Would I be bothered to get registered, get licensed, do this, do that, the other, and do all this? I wonder. I wouldn't have. And I think in Bruce, in Australia, aren't they considering $20 per airframe, or is it per person?
I'm not sure. People have said it's $20 per airframe, just like in Canada, where they're going to charge, I think, $5 per airframe and things. It's ridiculous. People will register one and they'll just transfer the sticker over every time they fly or something. They just won't bother.
It was the same. It was the same here in Portugal. They were considering doing per frame. So almost all recreational model aircraft owners would be bankrupt very, 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 very easily. Because I was just doing a small math, because we've opened part of our online registration, and I was registering all my camera capability flying models, and in the end I didn't know I had so many, but if it was at the $20 a pop, it would be quite a hefty charging rate. So that's why the rules were published 6 months ago, and still they are not enforced.
That's the thing, that the regulators aren't studying human psychology. I know human factors are an important thing in regulation, but they're not studying the psychology. It's a whole different audience now. We're not dealing with trained pilots who are beholden to the regulator for their license to fly. They're dealing with people in the street. And if you make it too hard to comply, people will just say, "Oh, I'm not going to do it." Simple as that. Pilots won't do that because they've got too much to lose. But people in the street, nah, damn it, I'm not going to pay all this money, and they'll just ignore it. So if you make a regulation that's a bad fit for the problem, you get very low level of compliance, which means your regulations are worse than useless. And I don't know, it's such a difficult thing, because now we have a square peg, which is the regulator, trying to deal with a round hole, and they've got no experience, no understanding. They're completely out of their depth, and I think it's going to be a disaster from start to finish.
Yeah, I can agree with Chris. I4D says that gas was per airframe over a certain weight, he thinks. And once again, congratulations, Chris, for flying the wardrobe. That was monumental. Props to you. Yeah,
Should we bring up the human? Should we bring up the thing about airline pilots? Because
go on, go on.
Like Gary, I did some research, and I may have very little credibility, and a lot of people have, you know, limited credibility in this whole field. But the one person, one company that must have a lot of credibility is Boeing. Boeing, you've got to believe Boeing knows what they're doing, right? They're one of the leading aircraft manufacturers in the world. So if Boeing says something, you've got to ascribe some validity to it. And they undertook a survey, and they found that human factors are a result in 80% of all the aircraft crashes. Human factors, and of those human factors, more than 50%, more than half, is down to pilot error. So we've got all these pilots that are crashing airplanes and costing thousands of lives out there, and they are the one group that is anti-drone. They're the ones who stand up in New Zealand here. Every time there's a drone incident anywhere in the world, they stand up and they demand more. They demand registration and more stronger regulations and bigger punishments. So I think it's time they got their own house in order before they dared to start criticizing a community that has killed nobody.
Would you expect a different result of a survey promoted by an aircraft manufacturer? Come on, Bruce. You're older than me. You know better than that.
Aircraft failure? Goodness me.
Come
no,
on.
Louis, I can't.
Manufacturer that does planes that flap wings. Come on.
Yeah, it is.
Come on. There's lots of vested interests on all of this. And it's a matter of who has the most vested interest financially at risk. And that's what was the movie that said, follow the money?
Yeah.
We just have to follow where the money is and what a strict drone regulation will bring to who will make more money. Just follow the money. It's the money trail, Bruce, not Boeing.
But there must be lots of other examples. This is just close to our hearts because it's what we talk about, isn't it, all the time? But there must have been lots of examples of public disputes about uses of parks and open areas and that. So, well, the skateboarder, yeah, we mentioned it earlier. Skateboarders need somewhere to skateboard.
Yeah,
I can't think of any bicycle. I can't think of others. But this battle must have been fought for all sorts of different hobbies all over the place, and it just happens to be ours at the minute.
Gary, just to jump in for a minute, I think Kerry's trying to say goodbye because
okay.
Yeah, it was just to say thank you very much for the invite. It's great to chat to so many like-minded individuals across the world and in Bradford. So, Ian, good to meet you. It's nice to see the face behind UAV Hive. That is you, isn't it? Then.
Yes, I do most of the bantering there on the Twitter account. Although I completely neglect the website these days because Twitter takes enough time as it is.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I know if I DM you the UAV Hive, I'm DMing you. Face to the name of that. But thank you very much, guys, for the invite. Gary, you've got my email address. It's been really good chatting with you, and thanks for all your support, and it is much appreciated.
Well done, you, Kerry, and we'll talk about you once you're gone. Thanks very much. Hopefully,
cheers. Now, bye.
Cheers. Take care. Thank you.
And now, besides the Brexit, we have a super Brexit, which is Bradford is outside of planet Earth.
I think
it's been outside of planet Earth for a long time.
Yeah, in many ways. And Wakefield's been mentioned. All these famous northern places where it's snowing. I mean, it won't be snowing where I'm from.
I like Hemel Hempstead. I think that's a great name. Hemel Hempstead. Who came up with that?
I don't know. I've done a lot of flying, a lot of working out of Hemel Hempstead. It's a funny old place. It's a funny old place. It suffers from being just outside the M25, so lots of very wealthy people live there that commute into London, and it's lost its. What we've got? We can talk about the Archers in a minute as well. I've been listening to that earlier. So now, let's ask. One person's not been speaking because he's been working on his bench here. Is Nicola? Before we go, because we're over the hour, let's ask Nicola. What's on the bench, Nicola?
Well. The usual, it's an autopilot that's supposed to go into the range at 2,400, and I've been fighting the the PDB I took out of another plane to put into that one, and something went wrong with the soldering, and then didn't want to desolder, so I had to basically throw it out. And now I'm starting on a new one. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past hour, more or less.
I see everybody
Nothing.
reviewing that 2.6 meter wingspan glider that you did last week. I see hundreds of videos of them, not hundreds.
It's 2.4. No, wait, it's different things. That's the 2.4 meter version, and that's the new one. The 2.6 one it's ancient.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Silly me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no thermal weather yet for you, I'm guessing.
Thursday or Friday, not sure. Not sure if I'd be able to go out flying. It has been raining today almost the whole day, and the forecast is pretty much the same for tomorrow, but we'll see.
Now, Kerry was great. I was gonna we easily did the hour there. But I was going to mention a couple of things in the news. I've forgotten the word. We've done Australia. FLIR buying Aeryon Labs. Does anyone have any thoughts and considerations about that? It's a bit strange.
And Aeryon is the only craft that is certified by Transport Canada under their advanced operations. So, what does that mean?
Well, yes, exactly. Yes. Well, fair play to them. And they were, funny enough, that was back to that story. They were at Farnborough in 2010 as well. I was stood next to them, but I went first.
With that one,
that brings us to a funny thing. Is the camera manufacturer starting to be a drone manufacturer?
Well, they bought those little doohickeys as well, didn't they? Those little
those $20,000 drones,
tiny little helicopter jobs. FLIR bought that as well.
Yeah.
So yes, they do now have 2 airframes. So
two, and they even make the cameras for the DJIs. They supply the cameras, and can the question is really, can an industrial camera manufacturer become a force to be reckoned on the drone space?
I think they can, because their cameras are targeted at the higher end commercial user. So this is a drone that's very well, it's at the top of that space. So I think it's a good decision for them, frankly. I think especially what we're seeing with police forces now adopting drones, and they're going in very much at the consumer end. But they're quite limited both by wind speed and whether it's raining. And that's a drone where it deals with most of those issues. It's a lot more tolerable airframe. So I think they'll be thinking of, we can get more sales to the police and fire service and so on. So it's certainly a company that's got market share that it isn't yet selling into that it could do.
And it'll have a horizontal link between with the helicopter. They'll have all the FLIR systems and all that. They'll be used to, police forces will be used to big FLIR, and they'll have constant integration, however they want to say. Oh, Louis, no, I don't think it was you, Louis. I think it was, you, Musa. Oh, very good.
He did the right thing.
You did the right thing there. You did the right thing there. And then what's the other thing? Kespry. I have forgotten the history of Kespry, because when I went to look at their website today, because a little bird told me that I really should have a look at that website. What is that website? Glassdoor, which I know not what that is really, because of the number of complaints from people that have just left or are leaving and all the trouble that's going on. And they sneakily got rid of 30-odd people in November, and it doesn't seem to have got out there. But why I'm mentioning the history is that I sort of remember when it was founded, and all the people have changed. 61.4 million in VC funding. Looks like they've run out of money. So I don't know.
30 out of how many?
It wasn't many. 50 or 60, something like that. It's not many people.
Reshuffling, like Airware?
That's a big reshuffling, like where I think, yes.
Oh my God! Now we are going to get flooded with lots of tough books and drones on eBay.
Oh, yes, that's right.
A friend of mine managed to buy several $1,000s tough books from that auction for $250. So he got himself a very nice tough book.
I've completely forgotten about that. I should not have put this article up, and I should have waited till after the auction till I mentioned it to anyone. That's what I should have done.
I was going to say, you've opened up raw wounds as well, because obviously I'm going for that same thing of being one of about 30 that's been made redundant. So I'm very familiar with Glassdoor now. I've been reviewing. I've been checking out all the potential employers I've been looking at, because you get all the employees putting reviews on there. So you'll get a company going, we've got a very proactive and dynamic and people-friendly culture, and you'll read something completely different on there from the staff. So yeah, it's a top site.
And that's worldwide, and it's a thing now in the working. Being self-employed, I don't know. So is that what LinkedIn should be? Is that what everyone uses rather than?
People use LinkedIn. It is actually a very good tool. There's Glassdoor there as well. I find Glassdoor a lot more spammy, so I only go on there and use bits of it, and the main bit I use of that is the review side, just for getting another opinion of a workplace. Because I think if you're committing to somewhere where you think, oh well, I'm going to be the next 5-10 years, rest of my life there, you want to know what it's really like, and so it's a good tool for that. But obviously, you've found another use for it as well, which is being able to get an idea of when a company's potentially coming to an end, because you'll see staff being laid off, and their opinions being raw and probably very open about what's going on there.
Yeah, so far, because obviously with this game you do end up knowing people that work in companies, or knowing of, or people make friend requests on LinkedIn. So I had a little look, and I did see that 5 of the people I knew ended their job at Kespry in November. So some of it's true. So I don't know how many more were there. I've put the link for those following along at home. I've put the link in the reviews and in the comments there. So look, at 12 minutes past. Did anyone else see anything else that caught their eye this week?
There was one thing, and I emailed to Bruce actually, just to give him a heads up, because it's a bigger story than I realised. There's a company that own a lot of the local newspapers throughout the UK, and I just spotted it in Leeds. There was the Yorkshire Post, but what they've actually done is they've done one template story. They've gone to the airprox basically, and they've written one hysterical story, and then what they've done is they've edited it for each city. So the Leeds one, they obviously gave them 90% of the article and said, give it an intro. So the Leeds intro was there was a 737 coming in, and this is 3 years ago. So the very fact they're using it from 3 years ago shows actually there hasn't been any issues since. It suggests actually people locally have been very responsible. But that aside, they said 3 years ago there was an airprox report where a pilot thinks he saw a drone, but they started it off with, on this day there was thousands of shoppers in Leeds city centre. They were presenting this scenario in your head of this drone hitting this aircraft, and yeah, because they said it would have been catastrophic, and it crashing down and blowing up the entire of Leeds city centre with all these shoppers in. When to my understanding, the aircraft don't fly over the city centre. The airport's on the outskirts, and they said a 737 has propellers, which obviously was news to us all. Yeah, no, it was a very bad story, and unfortunately, that's going up and down the UK in the local papers, just being edited to each city, so everyone's seeing that now. But the way to deal with this is, or one way is, the reporter's name's always on there, and they're almost always on Twitter. Is get on there as drone users and pull them up on all the inaccuracies, because it makes them look silly with their peers, which they don't like. And the next time they do a story, they might think of actually doing a little more research. So yeah, I jumped straight in there with the local report and how they were doing clickbait, and because that's exactly what it was, and obviously those kind of things they wind me up, and until we start saying something, we'll just keep getting bombarded with it. So it's just chipping away a little bit at a time. But that's what everyone in the cities that's getting this needs to do is pull up the local paper, and certainly on Facebook, people were credit to them. They were definitely doing that. You know, a lot of people laughing about the 737 with propellers in, and every little inaccuracy on there, which there were plenty.
Yeah. So
I saw that. Well, the interesting thing also was that look at the comments on the news story, and they're roundly ragging the paper as tabloid and clickbait. But the thing that struck me also in that story was that the pilot saw a black and white drone that came within 1,000 feet of the airliner. Can you see a drone from 1,000 feet? I mean, we've got a runway here, it's 1,000 feet, and when someone's got a drone at the other end, you can't see the damn thing. It's just too far away, and that's static. And when you're looking for it, so yeah, as Ian says, there's so many inconsistencies, but it just speaks to this whole media agenda of vilifying drones, because I'm sure drone stories get lots of clicks because people want to see who died today. And we as a group or as a community globally, we're not responding adequately. You've got one or two people like me, vigilantes like me and Ian, who go in and we put comments on. But in New Zealand, quite often if you pull them up on a point of fact in a story in the comment section, they're all moderated. They just won't publish it. They only publish the comments which support their report, and it's like it's worse than bad. So we have to get something going. I know the FPV Freedom Coalition in the USA is very slow to get going. I look at their videos and they're getting like 30 to 40 views or something, and there's just not the groundswell we need. Trouble is, I think nothing's going to happen until it's too late. When we have a catastrophic incident, that's when it'll happen. But it'll be too late then, because the damage will be done. We need to get out there now. And I don't want to, but I am still thinking maybe I'll have to set something up globally. I know that Node does, a modest job for DJI users, but we need something much more wide and all-embracing with some clout to it.
Yeah, well, we did circle back around to one of our favourite topics. I will just say Mika JJ mentioned something in the comments which I didn't know about. A crashed Swiss Post drone recovered. I missed that today, Monday, in the course of the morning. Zurich City Police recovered the Swiss Post drone which had come down into Lake Zurich. We are relieved the drone was located in the presumed search.
There was blood everywhere, though. It was blood everywhere. It was carrying blood samples.
That Massanet, was it? I had friends.
Yeah, it's like a drone crashed into a cemetery here and there were bodies all over the place. But the other incident was the one in Edinburgh where someone has been charged with flying a drone in the city centre or something. So there is bad things happening out there. It's just lucky there wasn't an airliner at the place. It was 50 metres up, I think he was. So just lucky he wasn't in the path of an airliner.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because as Ian's made mention of in the past, last year or the year before, I can't actually remember when it was, there was a chap that was flying in a little park not a million miles away from number 10 Downing Street. And the police collared him there and then and said, "You naughty boy, don't do it again," in effect. So this poor tourist in Edinburgh is a victim of the current Gatwick, hype. I don't know. Anyone else have an opinion? That's my opinion of that.
No, it's getting
awfully. Well, go in.
No, I was just going to say that's spot on. It's obviously because it's been in the media so much, it'll be in the mind of many of the policemen as well, and they won't want the call from the local newspaper that says, "Why aren't you doing anything?" It does make that Birmingham one though more of a surprise. I mean, obviously, it's an innocent thing, and they've got a guy there just filming a music video with his mate, so really, he's not doing anything malicious or intending any harm. But I did expect that regardless, he would have had the book thrown at him, so he's probably got away lightly compared to most people at the moment.
One thing I recommend people do is, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to lay a complaint. We have a thing called the Broadcasting Standards Commission. It's their responsibility to make sure that news reporting is balanced and fair. I'm going to start laying complaints every time we have a story which is unbalanced, unfair, and contains misinformation. And hopefully by doing this, this commission can levy fines and all sorts of things. Maybe we can just fine the damn media into submission to publish the right thing, because otherwise they're just going to carry on this vilification and this clickbait headline stuff. So I'm sure other countries must have something similar. Let's start using the tools that are available to us and call them to account in a very official, legal, punitive way.
They do, and there is a positive with that. There are quite a lot of people being proactive, doing that in the UK. A good example recently, I don't know if you've covered this before or not, but the Sun newspaper did a advert. This is a Sun newspaper that have been going over dramatic about drones, but especially recently, but probably going back years. And they did an advert for themselves with a guy flying, I think it was a Phantom drone, but he's flying it right close to people. It was a very irresponsible advert, broke about every drone law there is. Obviously, they've done it in a controlled environment, but they were presenting it as this was a bloke flying his drone and the way he was going about it. And the Advertising Standards Authority did rule in the drone users' favour, saying that they would have taken down the ad. It was just unfortunate by the time they'd done their look at all the complaints and done their judgment, that the ad had come to the end of its run anyway, so it didn't really penalise them this time. But at least people know now, if they do flag certainly an advert, it can be dealt with. And I know people are doing the press complaints to some of the stories, whether they're wildly inaccurate, and there have been people that have done them directly to the BBC. We're not doing them in enough numbers yet, but I am aware that people are now making more of an effort, knowing that they can put complaints. If nothing else, it just gives them that bit more aggravation. If you give them enough aggravation, eventually it'll come to the point they'll think, is it really worth us doing this entirely clickbait story, or are we going to get such an ear bending that it's just not worth it? And I think we do need to think about that. We need to shout more.
Yes, that is very true. Or I think we should just invent a new hobby, invent something that'll become all the rage, and then we can start complaining about it, and and get that in the papers instead. It's got to die down soon. It's getting dull. It's getting too much. It won't.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to jump in when you're talking. Then you make a good point there, though. If the media keep on with this, with any story, if you just keep going on about it, people become bored, and that stops it anyway. It's like now with Brexit. People they're like, I just wish we could hear the end of it now. People are like that, and eventually that with Jones, because with that the Birmingham story now, you'd have expected that to. I mean, I know the BBC reporter jumped straight on it, so maybe they were thinking of trying to make a big thing out of it. But that one, thankfully, didn't go anywhere. But that might be just because they're going, oh look, we've had enough for Jones now. Find us something else to go on about.
Yeah, I think we've got to be reaching that tipping point. And also, this could also just be because that, again, it's what we're interested in, isn't it? It's what we look at day in, day out. It's what we kind of are. And so, yeah, it's close to our hearts. Who knows? Who knows? Look, we're now 22 minutes past, so I think it is time to draw a veil under this. Unless, Louis, does anyone else have anything else to say?
Yeah, let's not talk about naughty boys and naughty pilots. Let's talk about Intel that recently released a new set of RealSense cameras,
yes,
which might bring the collision avoidance and drone safe navigation to the common mortals, unless they decide to cancel the cameras before, like they did with several of their companion computers. So let's see how it goes. These crazy little things have a place on plus 250 grams drones, and something that is quite nice for the open source of flying projects, which is the announcement of high-end drone company like Alta Drones that just recently announced their Alta Pro drone that is running an open source PX4 flight stack. It's very good for the PX4 project to be used on high-end drones. So let's welcome Alta Drones to the use of open sourced vehicles.
Absolutely. And Chris in the comments has got a link of a child being swooped on with 10 cops as he's preparing to fly in a park at the height of Japan's drone hysteria a few years ago. So the link is in the comments there. It's got to end soon. It's got to end soon. And with that, Go on.
I need to report something important. The Australians have retaliated to my video on the regulations by sending over a heat wave here in New Zealand. And as I speak, it is over 300 degrees outside my workshop, Kelvin, because we're all scientists here. So I fear once I log off from this webcast, I'm going to sweat like crazy. But while I'm logged on, I'm safe because, can you read my T-shirt?
What cool. Oh, no. Oh my goodness me. You had that very prepared. That's more preparation than I ever do for this.
Come on. If he was in Chicago, he wouldn't be wearing that T-shirt. They were announcing 35 Celsius negative in Chicago. Gosh. So that's cold enough for you, Ian. You wouldn't be on the shed with 35 negative.
No, I definitely wouldn't be. No. I've been a wimp. It's about -2 here, so that's not bad in the whole scheme of things.
Oh, well, if we're playing the temperature game, we had a modest about 28 today, and I think we are 38 tomorrow. So, yeah, it's 10 degrees warmer tomorrow, so it's 38 tomorrow with big thunderstorms from the west. Anyway, enough of the weather forecast. Look, we could have got this drivel going in another 4 minutes with an hour and 30. So I think I'm going to draw a line under this. Here's the pen to draw that line. Thanks. Most Kiwis would know a heat wave if it bit them on the arse. Not that I'm enjoying it much myself. Live comments all the way from Chris in his remote hot site there on top of a hill. So thanks very much, Divya. Hopefully you've had a great week, a lovely weekend of flying coming ahead of you. Be safe doing whatever you're doing. Don't forget 2100 GMT every Tuesday. We will talk further nonsense. Gentlemen, thank you very much. See you all next week. Cheers, eh?
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.